So my name is Jon Belber, and I'm behind this mask because of the situation in which we are, as Janice mentioned, we are all experiencing. And I am the education director here at Holly Hill Farm, and I am so fortunate to have beside me, next to me, and all around me, a beautiful farm, some wonderful, hardworking people who in this spring are taking on new and exciting and hardworking tasks to bring you information about the mere fact that plants want to grow, that birds are migrating, that nature is continuing to fill vacuums, to want to provide food, and to do so in a healthy, responsible way. Holly Hill Farm, the Friends of Holly Hill Farm, is a nonprofit organization that, as Janice mentioned, to those of you who've logged on here to our first Zoom live workshop. We're an organization that grows and sells vegetables, flowers, herbs, and fruit. And we also teach a great deal about those organic vegetables, flowers, herbs, and fruits. The farmers are out of sight because they are down in the field. They are preparing for this week's harvest. They are planting accordingly to a plan that was prepared back in winter. Growing fields, Peck's Meadow, which perhaps in another workshop day we might be able to see. We have to figure out our Wi-Fi abilities. But they're planning to plant, and they've already started to put carrots in the ground, to put summer squash up in a different field, to plant lettuces and sweet peas and sugar snap peas. They've got a whole garden plan and a whole big field to work on, to rotate, to amend with a healthy fertilizer, and to grow a good amount of good, healthy food and vegetables. At the same time, we're growing lots of those seedling starts for sale. And this weekend, starting with the members-only online plant sale on Friday at 4 and onwards throughout the weekend and into next week, we'll have more and more seedlings available. We've been working since late February to grow these teeny tiny seeds into teeny tiny seedling plants and get them to a point where they are ready to grow, ready to be transplanted out. One very likely reason that you all have decided to join us on this adventure of a Zoom live workshop is that you're interested too, and you might want to take part in some type of growing, and you may have the ability to build a raised bed with me today virtually. You may be able to find an old pot or different building materials that are healthy and safe to use to surround some dirt and do some growing. Hey, Tucker. And so we are very fortunate to be able to teach a little bit about what we know and hopefully inspire you. I have gotten some wonderful emails already from folks: Brian Fabrizio, Gina Vita, Sue Hess, Cindy Gardner, Glenn Nee, Karen, Catherine. Lots of good questions and comments and people taking time out to join us virtually here on the farm. Some of these questions, all the questions that are asked here, I will try and certainly address during the course of this 45 or 40-minute workshop today in the planting and growing of vegetables, flowers, and herbs. I'm also going to reference in a little bit some other forms of literature and books. We know the entire world is available on the World Wide Web, and we have some good insight on how to direct you to some good sites and some resources. Janice is also figuring out, my wonderful collaborator and thinker and outreach coordinator, on looking at any questions or answers that come up, so that when I pause to take a breath, we can share any questions or thoughts you have in live time. Okay, we're doing this in a live time fashion. I'm going to get started here with the agenda and let you know that I'm going to take you through some of the steps on gathering materials and supplies for building a raised bed. This can be done at your home. It can be done with permission at a community garden. And of course, various sizes of this can be done on a stoop outside your apartment, on a porch adjacent to your home. Whatever kind of space you're able to work with, we can find a way to get a container, to get a space to hold some good, healthy soil and do some planting. So I'm going to take you through the steps of what we do here when we build a raised garden bed, and talk about how to fill that raised garden bed, and look at what we can actually plant and do some of that planting today. So without anything pressing. We're going to get started and with some of the details. And I thank you all for joining us today. And I thank you to our Zoom sponsors and the board of directors who's helping to sponsor this workshop, and people who have worked behind the scenes for countless hours to make this possible. We would rather be teaching you en plein air all together here, but I'm at least 6 feet from Janice, who's filming, and we are providing a video, because that's where we're at these days, staying safe and healthy, as I hope all of you have the opportunity to do. So I called up Williams Sawmill in Carver, Mass. There are a few sawmills and lumber yards still in the state of Massachusetts, and certainly in the eastern part of the state. Copeland Lumber closed, it was going to have to reopen, but these great big old, there used to be one here, a big old sawmill that would take trees that are felled or have fallen down and plane them up and plank them, get them ready for whatever building people want to do. So Frank White, the wonderful owner, put me years ago in touch with Copeland Lumber, who's provided some of the wood from many of these barns and such, pointed me towards a lumber yard as a place to go. Carver is home to Williams Sawmill, and they have over here this wonderful rough cut pine. So it's good 2-inch thick pine from a pine tree. And I usually order about 8-foot lengths. And when I order from them, I know full well that this is not from a wonderful local Hingham Lumber or a wonderful Lowe's providing many building materials for people, but this is a true 2 inches. Very often in some of those larger stores, it's kiln dried or it's a little bit thinner than the actual true size. So this is a true 2 inches, and my tape measure can prove that it's actual 2 inches. It's a nice thickness. When I started building these garden beds, inspired by the Plymouth River School Garden at different schools, I was looking for a way to help hold the soil and give some definition to a garden bed. The farmers do not necessarily build these out in the field. They don't do that at all. They work with rows of open field. Janice.
Sorry to interrupt. Some of you your microphones are perhaps not muted. Can I ask you to mute yourself, please? I know there might be some wind here, but if you mute yourself during the presentation, then that will prevent background noise. Okay.
We'll certainly open up for unmuted questions and answers, right?
Okay.
Janice?
Yes.
Later on, but for now, you can mute, please.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Go ahead.
Good cooperation here in the new video world. A true 2 inches on this rough cut pine. When I started about 12 or 13 years ago to build some raised garden beds at schools so kids could walk around the perimeter of a garden bed without falling into the soil or by accident stepping on the plants, we figured this was a good size in which to work around the perimeter and still be able to get into plant.
And
so
this is not treated in any way.
This is not treated in any way. This is
do you want
rough
to
cut pine straight from the tree, very natural.
Do you want to talk about the ills of pressure treated wood, perhaps?
I do want to talk about the ills of pressure treated wood. So pressure treated wood, it's been treated with pressure to withstand the pressures of nature. It's meant to last a long time. However, when many companies and sourced materials are treated, that can leach into the soil. It will leach into the soil and affect the root systems of the plants you're growing. Whether you're growing at home or we're growing at schools or here at the farm in an education garden, we do not want to mess with that. We are an organic farm, and therefore what I learned from the organic farmers is how to best treat and care for the soil that's going to treat and care for and grow our plants. You've heard about how dirt makes my lunch. Well, dirt is essential, and if dirt is compromised and living in the results of pressure-treated materials oozing into the soil, then that's going to affect the food that we eat. Just like we do not use synthetic fertilizers here at the farm. We use organic materials. We make compost here at the farm to add to our garden beds. I'll talk about that later. When we fill these garden beds, I'll talk about what kinds of soil and organic materials do we use. If we gather seaweed in the fall to put onto the bed, that's a natural fertilizer that we can get from the beach. If we collect fallen leaves in autumn to protect our soil in the fall, that's an organic, sustainable resource. So we can talk a long time about how important that is. We believe very thoroughly in that. We're trying to find a good, solid product. Cedar, holding up some of our barns, lasts even longer than this rough cut pine. Cedar is also more expensive. Each one of these boards is about $10 to $11. Sometimes $8 if I buy in bulk. And this right here is an 8-foot board. And when I go down to Carver on a nice drive through the cranberry bogs and such, I pick up many different, well, they're all the same, 8-foot boards. And the 8-foot boards are not cut to perfection. So I'm going to tip one down right here and show you that today, just like in the cooking shows when I was preparing for this today, I had to square off the 8-foot board because it's a little bit longer. They're not as precise. They're giving me about an 8-foot length. So earlier, just this afternoon, I went into the middle shop. I worked the saw to get an exact 8-foot length.
Do you have corner braces for this?
I do not have corner braces. One could put corner braces here to help support the wood. I have not always done that. That's a little bit more helpful to support. There are times too, I'm going to show you Big Ed, where there is a bed that is literally raised a little further up off the ground. Thank you, Dan, for building Big Ed. This is a little bit easier, someone who's in a wheelchair, to access the growing space in here. Someone who might have a harder time bending over can work a little bit more easily with a bed that is literally has corner braces and is raised up 1, 2, 3 levels. Inside this garden bed right here, I'm going to give you a little tease. It's not just all soil. We put some leaves, we put some logs in there. That's a wonderful example of hugelkultur and of decomposition over the course of time. We really only need about 6 to 8 inches of depth for soil, which brings us back to our garden bed that we're making. I mentioned a true 2 inches. I'm going to mention here and show you that's a solid 8 inches wide, 8 inches deep. So the 8 inches is what we feel enough space. Let's imagine putting carrots in here. Carrots like to go down into the ground. They love to have that depth. They don't really need to go beyond 8 inches. Tomatoes, they do most of their growing up. They're almost like a vine. They up and they produce those wonderful, beautiful yellow, green, red tomatoes. They need space down below, but 8 inches is a good depth. That was a question we had earlier today. How deep?
And what about placement? This is on
So
a
this
mixture of wood
demonstration
chips
bed right here,
and grass.
this demonstration bed, I'm going to show you how we're going to put it together. This is not the permanent home of this raised bed. We are here close to Wi-Fi, close to a portal connection so that we can build. I'm going to show you inside our garden. When I place a raised bed, and this is 4 feet by 8 feet, 2 inches thick, 8 inches wide or deep, correct? I can place this at a home on a 4 foot by 8 foot patch of grass. I did that last week in Cohasset. Very happy family. We built 2 beds. They were so excited. They added a 3rd bed, placed right on the grass. They confirmed that the grass they were placing it on was not chemically treated, had not had any types of sprays or fertilizers. They felt comfortable that that grass could live underneath that soil. I could put a row of cardboard down before I put soil in to help break apart and decompose that grass that it's resting on. One time, Janice and I put a garden bed on a pitch of cement in Quincy. That's the space we had. We built up. We knew there was enough soil going down. It was a raised bed, raised higher than this. And we knew we had enough depth in there so that the cement at the bottom would not interact. Eventually, over time, whether you have a layer of cardboard down here or a row of leaves, serving as a mulch, it's going to break apart that soil over time, right? It's going to not give that grass a chance to grow. The grass might grow on the outside if this was left here, but when covered with good, healthy soil and the plants that we want growing in this garden bed, then we'll feel much more confident about whatever's underneath there is not going to interact. Again, please check to make sure that where you're placing it has not been chemically treated. We have to confirm whether or not UMass Amherst is doing soil tests. This is not a no.
No, the last time I checked, they were closed. So if you're concerned about your soil, for example, if you moved into a new house and you're not sure of the quality of the soil on which you want to put a raised bed, you could take a soil sample. If you Google UMass soil test, you'll find that information. The problem is that right now they are closed due to coronavirus. And I don't know when they're opening,
Okay.
but they could test for lead or other contaminants in the soil that you would not want the roots of your plants to take up.
There's something else that you could lay on the bottom, a sort of landscape fabric, non-penetrable surface that could be down there when we're working in the city of Boston or other areas and urban areas and suburban areas that are open to the recent use of lead paint. Then that is a stronger concern, just like the chemical fertilizers are.
Now, are you going to actually use one of those screws, or would you like to talk about what those
I
are
am going
made
to
out
use
of?
one of these screws, yeah.
Okay.
So here we have our bed. It's placed just as an example for you. You saw Jean White walking by, tending to the animals as she does every day, morning and night. This is not a good location for me to place the raised bed. It's here so I can show you how to do it. But eventually this is going to go to a school and be filled with soil and plants, and voila, we will grow and teach. Placement is important. When we go into the education garden, which used to be an herb garden, loved by Frank's mother, we'll show you how we're going to build a bed in there and why we're building a bed in there and how we're placing it and how we're spacing it. If you're going to build a garden bed at home, or you're going to place a pot at home, a container pot, or a garden terracotta pot, you've got to figure out what you're going to plant and whether or not the sun reaches that plant. There are some shade-loving plants, and if you have some shady spot in there, then that's important for that plant to receive some shade. But my goodness, right now in May, we are blessed, or we are fortunate to have early morning sun and late evening sun. We're in the period of spring where we're getting a lot of sunshine, as long as it's not snowing or freezing cold or a chance of 38 degrees tonight. So think about where the sun is, where it's rising and setting, how it rises, I believe, in the east and still sets in the west, or it myself, and how much sun your garden bed, your pot, your container will receive, because that's important. Tomatoes love sun. We're going to talk in future sessions, and you're going to email and ask us about what plants really love sun, what plants can handle a little bit of shade. So the placement of a garden bed, and this is rather permanent. I mean, I have moved garden beds from places to places sometimes, at schools or here at the farm in different gardens we have. It's not a great fun activity, but it can be done if we want to maximize our growing space. Obviously, when the farmers are picked their field space to grow, the farmers before them and the farmers before them decided, this is great. We get full sun here. We need that for our lettuces and our tomatoes and our peppers and our potatoes. So farmers think about where their sun is going to hit their crops. And you should think about that too, especially with something like a 4x8 bed. So we talked about depth. We talked about 8 inches. We talked about location, being aware of trees. And I look out around now and I see some trees that are having their leaves return, all right, deciduous trees, develop new leaves in the spring. Isn't that lovely? If they're going to shade our garden or shade your garden bed, then that's a consideration. If you're surrounded by evergreen trees, they never lose their greenery. So you got to figure out if that's too much shade, if some pine trees or some hollies or some evergreens are going to block some of your shade. You need to think about location. What else do you think about, Janice?
The roots of a tree.
The roots of a tree. The roots of a tree. That's it. The roots of a tree go far and wide. Whether or not you're reading the understory, you can figure out about the communication of trees through their root system. They are searching for nutrients. They're searching for establishment. The black walnut tree that's right there over by the picnic table, that has been there for a long while and will continue to be here for a long while. It's the dominant tree, and it's sourcing up a lot of different nutrients in quite a sphere around its base. We have to consider that you don't see many trees in growing fields. You don't see any trees in growing fields because of the fact that trees do spread their roots.
Now, can I ask a question? That tree is probably about, what do you think, 15, 20 feet to the closest garden bed?
Yes.
Is that far enough apart? If you were squished for space in your yard, would you plant a tree?
Far enough. We'll talk about what you're going to plant and what soil you're using to help when there is competition from a big old tree, or there's competition from the grass that was there that's cutting in the side, or weeds that want to try to grow. So we can help you with competition and figure out what the best way is to maximize your growth. So distance from a tree, there's a school garden. We've got a garden bed that is very close to a tree. The tree was very small at Jenkins when we started this years ago. The tree's gotten larger. Isn't that lovely? And we're going to try to put some hardy perennials in that garden bed that will come back every year and hopefully be able to share that space with the tree and be a little less reliant on some fragile tomatoes and things. We get some hardy plants in there. So back to the bed right here. The saw and careful cutting and my square triangle got me to 2 8-foot lengths. And then, if you're ready for some Tuesday afternoon math, I took another 8-foot board, I squared it off, and I cut that in half. So 3 8-foot boards, let's say $9 each, that's $27. My labor and time to cut them, okay? And now I have 2 4-foot ends, if you will. If the lengths are going towards Janice, a good 8 feet distance. This is a perfect bed for social distancing, Janice. And here I've got some nice exterior screws.
Are they galvanized?
They are galvanized, perhaps from a local hardware store or from your local Home Depot. And they're at least 2 inches long because I mentioned the thickness of the wood is 2 inches. So this is, I think, a 3-inch screw, which allows me penetration right into the next piece of wood to help hold it together. I started out with Mark Labasco, building and hammering with nails, a great satisfying nail hammering activity. However, the screws bind and hold together better the wood. So screws are a little bit better than nails, but it's very satisfying to also have success with hammering.
I'm gonna hold that.
I'm gonna ask Janice to put her foot or pressure onto that, because when I go from one to another, I want to make sure I have some success. Years ago, Sally got me a nice drill so I could have this portably around when I go to different garden beds. So thanks for getting that party started. And here's my Phillips screw head that has just slipped out. There it is. So I can tighten up the head of the, there, I'm hoping this is gonna work here. And then it's worked before, so it's just a matter of my consistently doing it here. I tested.
While we're waiting, does anybody have any questions? You could type them into the chat or you can unmute yourself. Go ahead, keep going.
Okay, I'm gonna put together with pressure holding on there. I like to put pressure on the heel of the drill. Slow and steady, says the rabbit, wins the race. In it goes. I usually do 2 screws. This little head is not wanting to stay in.
Technical difficulties.
I use, not too difficult, I got the screw in.
Good.
But this, for each corner, I usually use 2 screws. That seems to work. Janice mentioned earlier, a corner brace takes up a little bit of space, but also another way to help hold together those beds. I want to also mention, with regards to Mark Labasco, a lot of these garden beds have lasted for me 10, 12 years. Now, do they rot at the bottom? Yes, when the soil is filled. Do they rot if kids stand on them, which I encourage not? Yes, that can happen. So nothing gold can stay. This is not perfect, but it's a pretty good system for defining the space, holding the soil, and giving a real solid organic frame to your growing space.
I once made a cold frame and I went online and did some research, and I painted the interior of the cold frame with a mixture of linseed oil and organic mineral spirits.
Excellent.
So if you're concerned about that, you could Google that.
I
And
think we still have the frame of that cold frame over here.
Yep.
I'll do one more screw just to show you, and I did promise you this is going to go to a school when it's finished.
I'm sure people have questions about what we're going to fill this with.
Yeah, this is a terrific activity. We're those at schools, Ron Woolley at the Osgood School, different parents at different schools, or at home. We can help you with this and any other guidance that you're not getting today. This is the frame. 2 more screws, 2 more screws, 2 more screws. That's a portable, heavy, solid 4-foot, 8-foot frame.
And for $27,
$27 and
for
the
the
labor
cost of
and
the
the
wood.
screws.
Doesn't include the cost of the soil.
Does not include the cost of the soil. A framed bed.
Do you want to talk about the soil next?
Yeah, I want to move into the garden where we have another. Again, I'm going to liken it to WGBH's Do-It-Yourself Saturday and the cooking shows. And we'll go into the garden if we have the Wi-Fi and show you a 4x8, the 4x4 garden bed that's ready to go. This is our education garden. Sally was here working today, preparing it. Usually we have students here on field trips. And if they're here in springtime, they could be sowing radish right there, lettuces, some peas. Some plants come back, like kale. Kale's not a perennial, but it often seeds itself and comes back. I see some arugula that's come back there. This is garlic, soft neck garlic. Those planted in the fall by a school group. So we, like the farmers, are trying to grow a variety of crops. Diversity is rather important. So we have lots of different plants growing here. So it's not just a lettuce example or a tomato example. Lots of different vegetables.
So we have a question.
Please. This is good.
Faye would like to know how you move a raised bed. So I guess.
Yeah, so before I drill and screw together the 4 corners, I would bring those pre-cut pieces in our blueberry van or a farm truck to someone's home, or Williams Sawmill can deliver from Carver. They will deliver wood. You'd have to probably cut it to size. As I mentioned at the beginning, it comes a little bit longer than 8 feet, so you've got to square it off to get your 8-foot boards, and then your board to make 2 4-footers.
But if you wanted to move that, now that's smaller. This is a 4x4.
4x4. It's actually a 4x3.
So you could probably pick
1,
that
2,
up.
3. Yes, I did lift this down. So this is a pre-made. It was actually in a garden down below, and through help from a grant at our Farm to Food Pantry garden, we are removing some smaller beds and getting longer amount of grow space. Thank you, Louis Ferry. So we decided this 4-foot by 3-foot frame did not need to be in that garden. It needed to be up here where we had a bed that was falling apart. We had a 1-inch board, thank you, Don, that was just had not been treated well. It was falling apart. So we are going with a solid 2-inch. You can see compared to the garden bed that we were looking at out front.
This is an example. This is a 1-inch board.
That's a 1-inch board in front of you. Yep.
With no corner piece, and you can sort of see what happens to them.
A little frame.
After time.
Yep.
The soil expands in the winter with
And
frost
contract,
heaves.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, they do come apart. So hopefully you can see here. And that's the advantage of having a cross piece. But anyway, now.
Yeah, corner piece, exactly. So place this 4-foot by 3-foot bed in our rows. You see different rows, so we can have different beds with different crops. Students gathering around. We haven't had a naming contest yet where people can name the types of beds, the different beds that we have here. But here it is, a 4-foot by 3-foot bed. There is some existing soil here. We've been gardening here for many years. As I mentioned out front, you might be placing your garden bed or have the wood delivered and then build your frame on a piece of grass and you don't have any soil. We have some soil here. And you'll even see right next to it is an open bed and some of those leaves I talked about. So placing leaves at the bottom, if you have it, could be a good source. Most obviously, those are available in the fall. They make a nice layer at the bottom if you were to have some old leaves. They decompose. An old leaf pile in the back of your yard will eventually decompose. It's a lot of carbon matter, but it will decompose and make a wonderful, rich humus, as do many things decompose in the woods or purposefully in your compost pile. If you've seen our Facebook Live on compost and the beauty of making compost and how that can renew your garden as well as reduce your waste. Compost. We owe a lot to compost. And you can make it too. So we need to find a good soil mix to put in here. I've got some soil mix from over the years. And I can tell you that this garden soil mix can be purchased. It can be purchased from a store with a big bag, and that's a lot of bags to bring and then fill. I have two sources of folks who are making some pretty darn good, healthy soil compost mix. And the reason I feel confident about it is because they've done their analytics and their tests on the soil and compost mix that they're making. JF Price in Weymouth, shameless promotion here, they are making a wonderful soil compost mix, and they will deliver that in bulk. So in bulk, it's a minimum of 3 yards. So when we were at the Flaherty School in Braintree, building garden beds, dads and moms were building garden beds, and we needed soil to fill those garden beds, they brought 5 yards of their soil compost mix from JF Price
And
in Weymouth.
1 yard of soil will fill how many 4x8 raised beds?
1 yard of soil will probably fill a little more than 1 garden bed.
Okay.
So if I sometimes at a school or in a garden might suggest start with 2 garden beds, 4 feet by 8 feet, or start with 4. When I mentioned that couple last week and their family in Cohasset, we built 2 garden beds. They ordered 3 yards. They had some extra soil. They built another garden bed. So it's a lot of soil, but it's a good mix. And you want to know from where your soil comes from.
And the second source, you mentioned JF Price.
You want to know from where your soil comes from so that you are going to can knowledgeably, confidently grow some good, healthy food and respect and care for the environment rather than just bringing in some different soils and compost. There are some tremendously wonderful transfer stations and places in municipalities that are making their own compost from their resident town waste, town yard waste. And that's terrific. That's great they're doing that. That's a great way to recycle the old Christmas trees or brush or debris and grass clippings, but you cannot guarantee that's sourced and organic. So terrific for municipalities to do that. For growing your own food, JF Price in Weymouth and Pembroke Landscape Supply in Pembroke.
We have a question. If you had your own existing garden soil and you were adding compost, what would be the proper ratio of soil to compost?
Well, when they deliver, you know, it's 50-50. So if you're dealing with old soil or soil that is spent, soil that's not been used for a while, soil that has maybe grown the same plants over and over again, you want to try to enrich. So in this 4x3 or 4x4 bed, Holly Hill Farm and other garden centers will sell a compost. Costa Maine, I think even Miracle Grow is making a compost, but this is what the farmers use. If we're going to sell compost to folks during our seedling sale. When the farmers are planting in the field, they're sourcing organic compost. They add that to a long row of their planting. Back to this bed right here. I want to make sure if there's already soil in here as to this question, I'm going to definitely add, I don't know, 3 or 4 shovelfuls to an existing bed. Think of the compost, and I have a compost screen near me here, to help energize the soil, to rev up that soil. The soil is tired. The soil's been working hard. The person who asked the question, how much do I add? How much has the soil given? Is it rich looking in terms of its black nutrient quality? Is it spent having grown tomatoes for years or fed perennials for years? You can never go wrong by adding some compost into your existing garden bed. Even when I'm planting in pots, terracotta pots or plastic pots, I'm always going to try to add a little bit of compost. A new plant, when it goes into a garden bed or into a pot, it's going to need some good energy from that natural fertilizer, from that compost.
Now,
So
Johnny,
you can add compost in any amounts. You don't have to go buy bags and bags of it. But if you have existing soil, then go ahead and add some compost into it, even as you plant.
so we are almost out of time,
Okay,
believe it or
I'm
not.
going to show you.
The plan is to,
And Jess, to look up for any more questions or answers.
yes, there was
I
one
got some.
more.
I received some questions from folks on email that I will respond to by email in case it wasn't covered here, because we are a teaching farm. We are a people-powered farm, where we want to make sure that we can answer your questions. We can help you. We may not have all the answers. We may not keep all of the deer out, but we're certainly going to try to help troubleshoot and think about it. I want to add the planting.
So,
Sally,
one other question.
may I plant some German butterball potatoes? They can go underground right now. They need about a foot between each planting. So I haven't consulted the garden plan yet, but here it goes. Uno, dos, tres. And 3 down the middle. What's your question, Jess?
Someone wanted to know how high do you fill the bed? So, if we had more time, my guess is that you would have filled that bed higher, although with potatoes, you want to hill them up.
Would eventually build more soil in
So,
here.
if,
You don't want to fill it all the way to the top.
I would say about an inch or two below the top, don't you think? That
Well,
way,
maybe some
that
over
way
the top.
water won't spill over the top.
And you'll see also that the soil will descend upon the first rainstorm because it's going down into the garden bed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 potatoes planted in this bed. I might plant something else in that bed. You see garlic, peas, radish, kale, a lot of variety.
There was a question about mulching, and do we know of a source of organic straw or salt marsh hay?
Well, so the benefit of salt marsh hay is that it does not have that seed attached, right? And if you put just hay on your bed, then you're likely to have a have hayseed grow. So organic mulch could be seaweed. Seaweed could be an example of an organic mulch. Leaves could be an example of an organic mulch. I've gotten some coffee bags, which held organic coffee beans, and put that down under vines of cucumbers and zucchini. So that's an organic mulch. I don't know if they really are making an organic straw, but we've used basic straw from a feed store, as long as it's not hay, right? Hay is for horses and hay has seed, unless it's salt marsh hay. So we have put some straw down. In fact, there's some straw right here that Lori must have put down on this soft neck garlic. So that has done the job of protecting the soil and keeping any of the weeds out. You also see seaweed down there, as mentioned before. Please continue to write us, to contact us at the farm, online, through one of these many platforms to which we owe so much. And I'm so grateful to people filming, watching, being interested, and wanting to grow.
Right,
Grow some good, healthy food.
we have a couple of other questions. So,
Great.
let's see, let's find those questions. Mulch was one of them. Someone wants to know if you're building an above the ground raised bed, can use the same ratio of soil to compost. Well, the only thing I'm going to say about that is, while Johnny is labeling,
Yeah.
You don't want to plant your plants in 100% compost, so a mix of soil and compost 50-50 is good. Screen out the rocks, perhaps.
And remember down below, if someone got some rocky soil from a farm was mentioned there in Takesha, try to amend and put the healthy soil, healthy compost into that top part where the roots are. Down below, if the bed is very deep, you can put those leaves. You can put an old log to rot under there. The depth that you're looking for, again, is about 6 to 10 inches of good soil. That's what the roots are going to feed on. That's what the roots need access to.
Let's see if there's any other questions.
We'll water with rainwater on Janice's homemade company lemonade watering can. Thanks to her daughters and my daughters for drinking healthy lemonade and then turning it into a watering can. Shout out to Colin too if he's watching.
All right, I see Liza posted a link to Oogle Culture.
Oh, nice, Liza.
Oh, and Dirt made my lunch. Thank you, Liza.
Yeah. Dirt made my lunch.
Okay.
Dirt.
All
Thank you, Dirt. Thanks a bunch.
right, any other questions?
Feedback, as Janice mentioned, is so wonderful. That'll help guide us in future through the mask videos.
So should we say a word about our plant sale that's coming up, perhaps?
Yeah, keep visiting our website to learn more about our seedling sale. We'll be putting more seedlings up for sale for members this Friday, the 15th, and the 16th Saturday for everybody.
And our online store will be closed until then.
Information about how to become a member. And we'll have seedlings available more and more as the season warms. 38 degrees tonight, so a lot of plants are still in waiting as they grow and develop maturity and adversity as they get used to this New England spring.
Someone else just asked me a question. Is the recording of this available? Yes, so this will be recorded. If you've pre-registered, which obviously you did, you got the link. If you missed part of it, we will send the link out. I think there were some people who pre-registered and didn't make it to the call. And Liza, did I hear you comment on something?
Yes, just saying that our online store will be closed until Friday, including the seedlings, and it's opening back up on Friday for the members only plant sale, and the deadline to become a member in order to get the code and have access to that plant sale is tonight at midnight. But
So,
our plant sale for everyone else begins on Saturday morning.
Okay. So another thing that might be appropriate to mention here, so we've got a lot of space here. We have many raised beds with walking room in between. If you happen to live in a place where the sun in your yard is in your front yard and you're worried about road salt and whatnot, you might take into consideration that. That's not an issue here.
Can we do a follow-up link for your books, Janice, that you mentioned?
Oh, sure. I actually brought a whole bunch of gardening books if anybody is looking for resources. There's so much to learn. I've been gardening for over 30 years and I still don't know a lot. Here's some peas that we planted. These are these are climbing varieties, so they're going to need to grow tall. And Johnny went to fetch books. So you can grow in any number of different ways. These are all wood raised beds, but you can also grow in plastic pots. If you go on the Pinterest and look for some clever ideas, you can see all kinds of ways to grow plants using sort of found materials. And here are just a few of my
Here's a good screenshot right here.
Favorite resources. Actually, this is something that was available here. That is really hard to read, but it's actually a companion planting guide. I wonder if we could put that on our website.
And or we could also do a workshop on it. What plants go well together? She's got a book, Carrots Love Tomatoes. What plants do better after another plant? If one plant takes a lot of nutrients out of the soil, which one is good to follow? Hello, Hortensia and Lily.
Here's a good one. This is a very slim volume, not a very thick book, but there's a lot of information packed in this book. I like that one a lot.
Green City Grows, they're wonderful growers in the Boston area.
Right, someone just asked a question. Let's see if I can pull that up. I think that's it. Well, if there are no other questions.
I think, did you answer Gina's question about how often to fertilize veggies?
We didn't actually talk about fertilizing, and that is a whole subject all unto itself. You want
I will
to
give you a
dive into
brief,
that a little bit?
About fertilizing. I mentioned the compost at the beginning. I added water, which is wonderful, our rainwater. We sell, and there are a lot of available natural, organic, often liquid fertilizers. Neptune's Harvest in Gloucester, Mass. makes some wonderful fish fertilizers. And yes, I mean fish fertilizers that are potent and the byproduct of the fishing industry, which of course is alive and well, thank goodness, in this age, both on the South Shore and in the North Shore. And that fish product is a great natural fertilizer. We also can talk and reference the Native Americans who were using a fish fertilizer well before we arrived in the burying of fish and parts that would help decompose and fertilize the plants that were growing there. So before you go shopping for synthetic fertilizers and things, you can certainly be adding fish emulsion, 1 part fish emulsion to 7 parts water, for instance. Just a little dab will do in your watering can. That's a nice natural fertilizer when you're transplanting a seedling or you're watering on a hot, dry day when it's not been receiving as much nutrients. So it's a good natural product, Neptune's Harvest.
And I believe the package recommendations say about once every 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think
Make
so.
a dilution and sprinkle. So use it on your plants when you transplant into the garden, and then every couple of weeks. Of course, if you don't get to it every 2 weeks, that's fine, but the more the better.
Right. There's a lot you can do. Plants what to grow, give them a good, healthy space to do that, and when possible, try to choose organic strategies to help them along as they adapt and deal with nature in their new homes. As we did today, we built new homes. We talked about new homes for them in framed raised beds. Many ways to grow, and we wish you happy growing.
Okay, great. And Liza just posted a link. Great. Companion plants. Thank you so much. Any last questions before we end here today? If you'd like to unmute yourself and speak, that's fine. If you're not comfortable, you can send a message in the chat.
I have some raised beds that I haven't filled yet. I was wondering if I could, pay or make a donation to have a consultation on what to plant where. I have.
Oh, that's music to Johnny's ears. I'm sorry. What is your? I can't see who's speaking, but
My name
what's
is
your name?
Regina. Regina.
Regina.
I know there's a Gina, but I'm Regina.
Regina.
Yeah.
Regina has some materials for raised beds in her yard, and she would like to know.
They're already made. They're already filled.
Oh, they're made. Okay, but you need a visit.
I need like someone to show me what to plant where.
Okay. All right.
They're totally blank. My husband's after me. He said, when are you going to plant out there? I said, it's too cold for me to go out
Well,
there.
don't. So actually, there are many cold weather plants that you could be planting. And as Johnny said at the beginning, I don't know if you were on the call yet, but
I was
farmers
a little
have been
bit
busy
late.
planting peas and lettuce and spinach and kale and things that are tolerant of cold weather. But it's too early right now to plant tomatoes and peppers and zucchinis and things like that. So don't worry. You are not.
I'm not late.
Not too late. But if you would like to get in touch, you can email Jon, Jon, not John.
I have the email. I got it off of something. But I'll send him an email, and I would happily make a donation to Holly Hill Farm if you would come out and just tell me what to put where.
That's great. Well, a lot of it depends on what you'd like to eat and what kind of sun exposure you have.
Yeah.
So
a lot of sun. Lot of sun. I'm a big girl and a big eater. I eat everything.
Okay.
And I
we'll be right over.
Seeds. I just don't know what to do with them. Okay.
Okay. Great. Well, we know how to make the change that.
You know how to tell me where to go.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Hi, John. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah DiMatteo, and I'm a teacher in town. And I just wanted Johnny to know we're starting Seed Folks this week, distance learning.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah,
that's
so
what grade?
That's in 6th grade, and we usually do a field trip with John to the community garden. But obviously, may or may not have, I don't know if we can do that this year, but maybe we can do a Zoom or something with the kids somehow. to
Oh,
make it
that's
fun.
great. Well, you should reach out and get in touch with him. I don't know, you probably
I
couldn't
will
hear,
on
but
email, but I just want him to know
Sarah.
we started it this week. He'll be excited.
great. They're reading Seed Folks in 6th grade.
Oh, fantastic.
That's great.
Fleischman.
Yep,
That's great. That's great.
Oh,
Any,
Sarah DiMatteo.
yes. I'm here.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, John.
Whoops, sorry. I
Well,
looked
thank
away
you
and I-
very much for all this.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's much more to be talked about: fertilizing, companion planting.
We
So
have
if
our
you
notes. We'll get
if
to
you
that.
have an opinion, Liza, thank you very much for monitoring from home. Liza sent out a link to a survey, which is a very quick Google form. Please send us your comments about what you'd like to learn from us, what we could do to teach you, to better engage you. We're going to try and do weekly Facebook Live videos. Depends on the weather, and if not, we'll probably do something indoors. We've already done 3. We did one on Earth Day. We did another one on compost, and we did last week a Facebook Live about invasive plants. And tomorrow we're going to do one about the animals. And there you see them having their dinner behind Johnny. So, you know, more to come. Videos, Facebook Live, and
Fireside chats.
more Zoom chats. So thank you all so much. I don't see any more questions here unless I missed something. Give a yell.
Be safe.
But thank you so much, and happy growing. And thank you so much for your support in helping us make this first Zoom happen today. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Holly Hill Farm.